we're expecting is you can make smoked ribs with a smoker by Shirley Anderson. Like, the link to the video will be in the description below. Go and check them out. So let's get into this vaccine in 3, 2, 1.
There are a lot of ways to make ribs, but I think most of us can agree that smoking is one
Yeah.
of the best. And obviously, if you don't have a smoker like most people,
Yeah.
it's pretty hard to make them yourself. Now, I live at an
Yeah.
apartment, so all I have is a tiny little portable gas grill. But recently, I decided that I would challenge myself and try to see if I can make authentic smoked ribs using
Yeah.
only that. So it's gonna take a bit of trial and error, and I have no idea if it's gonna work or not, but I figured I'd give it a shot and we'll see how it
Yeah.
goes. Now, when it comes to smoking meat, there's basically 3 things that I would consider to be the most important. And the first is gonna be maintaining constant smoke over a long period of time. In a typical smoker, this is pretty simple because they're designed to have easy access to the smoker compartment where you can just load your wood chips or pucks or whatever that particular smoker uses.
Yeah.
In my case, I have to make do with a small gas grill that doesn't have that dedicated compartment, so I'm just gonna use a small smoker box that I can load with wood chips. Now, the next and possibly most important factor is temperature control. Aside from the smoky flavor, the other defining aspect of a smoked food is that tenderness achieved from a long and slow cooking period. So most smokers have a gauge that allows you to monitor the temperature at all times, but unfortunately my grill doesn't have that. This led to some difficulties during my first attempt at smoking these ribs, and they ended up way too dry that first time because I had no clue what temperature I was using. So for this time, I bought a digital probe thermometer that I can use to monitor my temperature at all times. Now finally, the third factor in achieving properly smoked meat is to use indirect heat, meaning that we don't want the meat directly over the heat source. Instead, the meat should be on an unlit portion of the grill in order to maintain that lower temperature and prevent any burning and charring. Luckily, my grill does have 2 separate burners, so I can leave one lit and one unlit, and I'll place the ribs on top of the unlit side. So I've come up with some ways to check off all of the meat smoking boxes using my tiny gas grill, and now all that's left to do is try it out and see if I can actually get it to work. So let's do it. Now the first thing to do here is of course season the ribs. And in this case, I made my own rub consisting of brown sugar, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, paprika, salt, and black pepper. So I'll leave that recipe on the screen for anyone interested. So I'll just spread the rub all over the ribs and let them sit for about an hour to help the seasoning soak in a bit. Now while those are resting, I'm gonna go ahead and get the grill set up. Basically all I've got here is my 2-burner gas grill, my smoker box, which I'll fill with hickory wood chips to incorporate that smoky flavor, and my thermometer with 2 separate temperature probes on it. Now, like I said, I already made one attempt at smoking these ribs, and it didn't turn out so well because I didn't have that thermometer, and my temperature must have gotten way too high because my ribs turned out extremely dry after just a couple of hours of cooking. And that was with 1 burner lit on my grill, set to the lowest setting. So now I know that this time I'll need to take it a step further and actually prop my grill lid open a little bit in order to bring that temperature down even further. In this case, I'm aiming to keep my temperature between 225 and 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So after about an hour, I'm ready to cook, and the first thing to do was set up my smoker box. I could have placed the smoker box underneath the grates of the grill, which is sort of how it's intended to be used, but instead I decided to place it right on top of the grates because I'll have to switch out the wood chips every hour or so as they burn out, and this will just make it a lot easier to do that. So I was hoping that the wood chips would still get hot enough up there in order to create the amount of smoke that I need. I also soaked the wood chips in a little bit of water beforehand to slow down the release of smoke a little bit, and then I just filled my smoker box with those wood chips. So once my grill was heated, I turned off the left burner and placed my ribs onto that left side of the grill to utilize the indirect heat. Since I really only cared about the temperature of the grill right near the ribs, that's where I placed my temperature probe. And I also went ahead and placed the second probe on the side with the direct heat just for fun so I could see the differences in temperature between the 2 sides. Then I just waited a few minutes to let the temperature stabilize before making any necessary adjustments. So it's been about 15 minutes and you can see I'm touching 270 here. So I definitely need to find a way to bring down the temperature. But I also have another issue because if I open up the grill here, I'm not really getting much smoke either. So I do think I'll need to transfer the smoker box down into the bottom part of the grill to really get it hot enough.
Wow.
So basically I've got a little bit of thin smoke coming out of my smoker box, which I think is perfect because I do want a pretty slow release of steam. And then I laid my ribs back down and I actually found these little pieces of metal that are perfect for just providing a little bit of extra height to keep the grill open a little bit further, and they're perfectly shaped to keep these probes in place. That actually worked out way better than I could have ever planned. Obviously it's still coming up to temp, but we'll see where it goes when it evens out, and if I need to open it even further, then I'll do that. I started off just putting the piece of metal along the front of the grill, which provided a little bit of lift, but not a ton. And after a few minutes, my temperature was still a little bit too high. So I found 2 more pieces of metal, which I could then place on the sides of the grill in order to achieve a higher angle of opening. Then from there, I could adjust the pieces of metal back and forth and get my temperature exactly where I need it. Then once I got my temperature stabilized, all that was left to do from there was let them cook for several hours, switching out the wood chips about every hour or so as they burnt out. Each time I did that, I had to remove the ribs from the grill temporarily in order to access the smoker box. Then when I added the new wood chips, I turned up the temperature on the grill to high just for a few minutes to get some smoke going before adding the ribs back on. So it was a bit more of a hassle than it would be with a typical smoker, but given the circumstances, it really wasn't too bad. I was aiming for a final internal temperature of about 190 to 200 degrees on the thickest portion of the ribs. So after about 4 hours, the temperature was hovering around 185 degrees. So at that point, I just spread some barbecue sauce on the ribs and let them cook for about another half hour to finish them off. I ended up overshooting my temperature range a bit, and they ended up closer to 205 degrees Fahrenheit. So next time I'd probably put the barbecue sauce on a bit earlier and then take them off earlier. But overall, they still looked pretty good.
Yeah,
So
you look
time
good.
for the moment of truth. After letting them rest for about 20 minutes, I brought them in for the final taste test. On my first impression, I was a bit nervous that they'd
You
be
look
too
good.
dried out because I did cook them a little longer than I wanted to. So I started with a thinner piece, and I could definitely tell that they were slightly dry, but flavor-wise, they were actually really good. I definitely tasted the smoky flavor, and overall, I was really happy with how they turned out.
Yeah, you look
So
good.
next, I tried one of the thicker pieces, and as expected, it was even better. Still with that nice smoky flavor, but it was a lot juicier and more tender than the thinner piece. The smoky flavor on these ribs wasn't quite as evident as it would be when using a proper smoker, but it definitely still was there. Like I said, these ribs were pretty tender, but they weren't the most tender I've ever had. They did come off the bone easily, but I wouldn't really say they were falling off like a lot of
And the ribs, you look good. Yeah.
the ribs that I've had in the past. So if I were to do it again, I would try to maintain an even lower temperature, probably between about 200 and 225 degrees Fahrenheit, which would not only prevent the ribs from drying out, but it would slow down the cooking time, leading to a more tender final product, and it would allow more time for the smoke to penetrate, leading to an even smokier flavor. But either way, I think this experiment showed that it is possible to achieve properly smoked ribs on a gas grill, even using a small portable one like I have. And now if you want to see me try to master New York style pizza at home, you can click on the playlist right here. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you over there.
The ribs, you look good. Yeah. 10 of 10. Yeah. That was You Can Make Smoked Ribs with a Smoker by Shirley Anderson. The link to the video will be in the description below. Go and check them out. And drop a like if you like. And comment down below if you want to see more reaction like this one. And subscribe if you're new. And click the bell so you'll be notified when I upload. And what?